So question number 6 out of 11-2. A randomized controlled trial was designed to compare the effectiveness of splinting versus surgery in the treatment of carpal tunnel syndrome. Results are given in the table below, and they list out the study that this came from. The results are based on evaluations made 1 year after treatment. Use a 0.01 significance level to test the claim that success is independent of the type of treatment. What do the results suggest about treating carpal tunnel syndrome? So one of the nice things again about our test of independence is our null hypothesis will always be independent. Our alternate hypothesis will always be not independent. So we have treatment and success as our variables here. So our null hypothesis, treatment and success are independent. And our alternate, treatment and success are not independent. So we'll put the R, we'll put the S, but our claim was of independence. So we're going to talk about whether or not we have the evidence to reject this claim. Our alpha here, and be careful identifying the alpha, it's not always 0.05. So alpha is 0.01, which means we are going to reject the null hypothesis if our p-value is less than or equal to 0.01. So now we're ready to take our 4 numbers over into StatDisk to find our test statistic, which is the chi-square, and to go ahead and get our corresponding p-value there. So let's get rid of them from the last. So we had 60 and 67 in the first column and 23 and 6 in the next column.
Yep.
And so this is a test of independence, which means we were given a contingency tables. These numbers are frequencies. That's going to be important when we get to the next chapter, which deals with quantitative data. So contingency tables, our significance level this time was 0.01. Our data is in columns 4 and 5 this time. Hit evaluate, hit plot. And what we see here is our test statistic there is off in the tail. Let me copy the dialog box over and head on back here. And what we get is 9.750 for our test statistic, and its corresponding p-value 0.0018. And this is why you will always see me lining up by place value there. So I don't compare the wrong values in each of them to each other. So our p-value was less than our significance level. And this is the other reason I also like to look at the plot screen. Plot screen, my test result was off in the tail. That's telling me reject. P-value is less than alpha. That's telling me to go ahead and reject our null hypothesis here. And when we reject the null hypothesis, that means that we have sufficient evidence to And it's going to be acting up again on me. So did that fix it? Yes, it did. So we have sufficient evidence to, we started the R. R is for reject the claim that success is independent of the type of treatment. So success is independent of the type of treatment. So we rejected the null hypothesis. That's why we had sufficient evidence. So we have the evidence to reject the claim that these two things are independent of each other. So there is some dependence here. We did get different results by different treatments. And since there's only two of them here, we can go back and take a look at what we saw up top here. So what we saw is we saw about a 3-to-1 success rate for the splint, and we saw about an 11-to-1 success rate for surgery. And because we rejected the null hypothesis, that means that the difference that we're seeing here is significant. So what is this telling us here? Well, since there was only two options, whichever one was more successful in our sample, we can say is going to be more successful in the population. So what do the results suggest about treating carpal tunnel syndrome? That surgery is more successful than splint treatment. Now, was splint treatment unsuccessful? It was successful about 75% of the time. A little bit less than that. Overall, I'd say has a pretty good success rate. Not nearly what surgery has. One of the reasons to keep that in mind is surgery is an invasive treatment. Is surgery going to be the right treatment for everybody? Are you gonna want, if you've got a 90-year-old person who has carpal tunnel syndrome, are you really gonna wanna put them under anesthesia and treat them with surgery when you do have an alternate that, although not as successful, is still successful? So one of the things that hopefully we're driving home is when we're phrasing our interpretation answers here, we're trying to keep rather basic, and what most people do is they try to over summarize what's going on. What did we test to see here? With only two options, we're really testing to see if there's any difference in the success rates. There is a difference in success rates. Now we'd have to go back and say, well, are they good success rates, bad success rates? That's not what we got from this particular test here. So all that we can say is, yeah, surgery appears to be more, based on the evidence, surgery is more successful than splint. Mark?
Nothing here. Sounds good.
Okay.